Okay, you are good. So, well, I think you were presenting. So, why don't you do an introduction and that's
Right.
yourself. Oh, you want to see where you are? Here, we can do that. This,
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's
I wasn't sure if I could see the people over here, but there's a camera on me here too.
yes. This is a camera on you.
Okay.
So, there, that's you. Okay, and we can turn that if you want. Okay,
All right, my name's Steve Muggenberg. I'm a CSS alum, class of 2017. Thanks for having me this morning. Looking forward to talking about some nerdy stuff. I heard you talking about getters and setters already. That's some powerful stuff. Don't underestimate it. I was just doing a project a few months ago. We moved a whole bunch of logic into a getter and a setter so that we didn't have to manage order status across a whole bunch of files. It was causing issues. It seemed like a very small change, but it was easy to overlook what you can do with getters and setters. But that class name should look familiar. CIS is my people, okay? And that number at the bottom, not just my favorite number, that is today's date in what my humble opinion is the superior date format. You're not going to get any weird errors in your programs with special characters. When you sort, you're going to get in the right order, not dealing with any of this month, day, year nonsense. Just a little controversy to start out. The agenda, I want to talk a little bit about myself first, real quickly, and then a career overview. First, my internship and employment at Elite Minnesota Power, and then now DigiKey. And then I want to talk more specifically about collaborating remotely and working on teams that are a hybrid between remote and in-person, particularly as it pertains to DigiKey. We might touch on future career path, might skip over that. I want to focus on the questions section. I might go over some of this content at a higher level and then take notes or think about what you're interested in. And then I want to know what
or we might just interrupt you as you talk.
Interrupt me as I talk. Yep. Just make sure you're getting those questions in. I want to know what you're interested in. You know your syllabus, you know what you're learning in the class, and I don't want to dive into that content in particular. So, Steve Muggenberg, I've been at DigiKey for 2 years now. Graduated St. Scholastica with BA in computer science. I like to spend my free time with my wife on the beach. Find us in Florida, Hawaii, anywhere there's sand in an ocean, you can find us there. By day, I'm a disc golfer. By night, I'm a Nordic skier. By day and night, I mean summer and winter. And I'm also a self-proclaimed super nerd. I'll let you take a guess at what that means for yourself. All right, moving on to my career at Elite, or Minnesota Power, subsidiary of Elite. My job title there was programmer analyst. I find that important because there was more of a mix between implementing third-party software and then implementing customizations and programming for that third party. There was less development associated with that. That being said, Elite Maps is the name of the homegrown Python application that I wrote as an intern. There are a lot of lessons learned looking back at what I did. Could have done a lot of things differently, how I structured the program, probably wouldn't have used Python. So we could talk about that. I also I was on the GIS team. We worked on the C# customizations. We called them the ArcGIS auto updaters for Esri's ArcGIS desktop app. And then in the later half of my employment, I also supported the VX Field application. That was also third-party software. There was a server component where we had some JavaScript customizations, as well as an iPad support component. And I also did some Linux server administration. I wrote some cron tab jobs and some Python scripts to help support the application there.
How long were you at Elite? Because you did your internship
Yeah,
there.
the internship was for 2 years and then stayed on full time for another 5 years after that. Yeah, so and then maybe 2 to 3 years on the VX Field application, but GIS the whole time.
Who's at Elite who spent late, only one, two of you were late this summer? Or intern, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, we're seeing a lot of the late work these days.
Yeah, I was really happy with their employment. I liked the work, but like I talked about, it was less development, which is how I ended up deciding to move to DigiKey. Perfect transition to become a software engineer where I'm doing almost exclusively development. Here we implement more of the typical agile development practices that I didn't see at a smaller IT shop like at Elite. We do unit testing, code reviews using Azure DevOps. We have more typical QA validation and break fix cycles as part of our Agile and Scrum framework. We do lots of API development using Swagger. Most of what I work on is in-house C# development. We use Kafka for message processors, MongoDB, as well as a couple other database types for data persistence. We use Kubernetes for our application deployments, and we manage it with Rancher. And I also work on a little bit of the code base for UI support that's using Microsoft's ASP.NET MVC or Model View Controller. But I'd say it's a bit more of a legacy code base. It's pretty old code. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies of how it's written. You can have some unexpected consequences of certain changes. You might think you're working on a particular page. Okay, this change is only going to affect this page. No, that affects 3 other completely seemingly unrelated pages. So there are a lot of considerations when you work on a legacy code base like that. With development, and especially QA can get balloon up pretty quickly, the scope of what needs to be tested just for otherwise a small change.
So can we just talk about Kubernetes a little bit?
Sure.
So, yeah, because they might be familiar with Docker, but maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're running Docker images?
Yeah.
So one of the things we're trying to do in this class now is talk more about microservice architecture, so
Yeah.
smaller stuff. So
Mhm.
do you do, I mean, is that something kind of where you do it, where you're running Visual Studio projects on separate Docker images
Yeah.
within Kubernetes?
For sure, and a lot of that plays into the API development, forming things using that model. We're just working on a project right now to kind of combine all of our MongoDB connections into one API. So let's say the database connection string changes, we just have to update it in that one API that everything else is connecting to, versus having to update that connection in every single application that connects to our MongoDB. So that's part of that microservice concept, is breaking out, thinking of connecting to your database as a service. It's a very small job, but you're going to write an application for it and deploy it out to its own container. Okay. So on those UI pages, my team is working exclusively with the .cn domain. We support China sales. With that comes collaborating with teams globally. We have our team in Shanghai that supports the local culturalization. We have Bloomington-based employees. We work with the teams based in Thief River Falls. And then we also directly work with developers based in India who are on our team. That's the Global Capability Center, GCC. And then we also have some other folks who are strictly remote, working out of their home offices. I think a few are in Texas, some throughout Minnesota. So when we talk about a remote or hybrid work style, you have people who are co-located with each other, but in places, and then people who are strictly remote. So with that comes a lot of challenges, and to kind of think about those challenges, I'll back out. If you think about like a class project, just your own development you need to write, a web page that does something, and you can think about, all right, I need to store some data, I need to have a user interface, a few other things, and you can just think about it in your head, make those decisions as fast as you can think about them. Now, if you're wanting to build a bigger web page, you need some more team members, but now you're going to need to communicate those ideas with your team members, and that takes time. Maybe people don't understand what you're talking about, and you have to rephrase it. You also have to find time to meet. When, okay, can we meet in class? Do we want to wait until class? Can we use email? Can I communicate my ideas through email? Is that too challenging? Now, if we go to a global company and we're trying to sell parts across the world, now we're dealing with time zones. Are we awake at the same time? Do I have to wait until you don't have soccer practice in the evening so that we can meet during your morning, my evening time? That's not for another week. Can I communicate my ideas by recording a screen share or something and send that out in email? But is there a risk of miscommunication that way? So there are a lot of complications that come with collaborating across time zones, across cultures, that we've really had to learn how to navigate by working on the team that I work on. And the way I see it, there's a high demand for developers. Companies are going to get those developers where they can, whether that's locally. If they can't get them locally, they'll go and look across the globe where that work is available. And so I think most big companies, if not all companies, you're going to be seeing people working across time zones and remotely and things like that. There's a question.
That's something I had to deal with in my internship. It's obviously I'm in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I would have my work shifts start at 8 a.m.
Mhm.
And a lot of team members that I worked with lived in like Pennsylvania, so they wouldn't be active until like 10. So I would have like 2 hours where I had to just do what I could until I could interact with them.
Exactly. You're structuring your day based off of, okay, well, I have to do my personal development in this chunk of time when they're not available. I have to have all my meetings at this chunk of time. And
So, and you said you're working with people in India, so what is
Yeah.
India? Is that 8 hours ahead of them, or?
yeah, some 8-9 hours.
Yeah.
Culturally, they're accustomed to working kind of midday and then come back from the office and then work another chunk of time during their evening time. So that's where our overlap is. We connect with our India team every day, kind of in the US morning time, their evening time, for a couple hours. So it's really concentrated. All right, get all of our communication done right away in the morning.
So did you say you were working on the China websites?
Yeah.
So that was, so you have team members in China, or?
Yeah, for sure.
Because what's that?
They're 13 hours ahead. There's no overlap. Everything there, everything there is ad hoc. If you need to meet, you need to schedule it, say, hey, are you available this time? No. Do we meet in your morning, your evening? And outside of maybe a couple of select technical folks that we meet with weekly, but even then, that's a long time to wait. You're talking about, I have this one little blocking question. It's going to push the deployment date out by a week because that's the next time that I can get it answered. So, yeah, other questions on this? This is one of the topics I'm more passionate about. It
So
work
what
really closely with it.
you were talking about email. I mean, I've seen companies use Slack or some sort of asynchronous. So what do you find, or what have you found useful there? Do you use like in GitHub? Do you use like there's a issues in GitHub, or where are you exchanging some of this asynchronous?
We use Microsoft Teams company-wide. That's kind of our instant messaging that everybody uses. It's pretty reliable. Some things aren't managed well in like you can get topics crossed up. Email can sometimes help you organize your discussions better. Otherwise, yeah, we use DevOps. So we have our Scrum boards where you can manage tasks and break up your communications by task, and you can put notes on the digital task board, I guess, and tag people and comment, say, hey, I need help with this task at so and so. can you provide this here? And then you can check the next morning, or maybe you get an email saying that you were added back with the information you requested.
Is that Microsoft DevOps?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and then they have digital, I haven't used that very much, they have digital Scrum, because we were just talking about Scrum board, so they have digital Scrum board.
Yes, yeah, I think it's Azure DevOps, that one right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, other questions on this? Otherwise, my next slide is career path. We can talk about it if you're interested. And from there, just time for questions. I put all the topics up here for reference. I can go back to any of the slides as needed.
I kind of want to talk about career path a bit.
Oh, sure.
The kind of situation I'm currently involved in is, I've worked at this company for 4 years. I have like decent experience, I have good performance reviews, all that. But being as like a student with not a lot of experience, a lot of even like the entry level coding jobs require like a massive amount of experience. Do you have
Sure.
anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think that's where my introduction to coding, the internship and employment at Minnesota Power was less development based, so they didn't have as strict requirements for coding, but I still got coding experience. Then I could put that on my resume. I applied to DigiKey. I've got 5 years supporting these C# auto updaters and Python applications and such. And that gets you in, and then you might find, well, what I found when I started at DigiKey is all these new concepts were just rushed in, all these Scrum concepts and things, and I had to learn really fast those things where my previous employment fell short, where we weren't using those concepts. So, but yeah, getting a foot in the door job can help. Internships can help.
So much, I mean, I often see students posting, or, looking at job posts, and I often tell, as a student, your student work class would kind of count, so I mean, even if, I would say, certainly anything that says 2 years of experience, you should be applying to as an entry level student. So in my mind, 2 or 3 years experience is what they classify as an entry level, as that's what you've been programming in class for that line. It doesn't really translate, but that seems to be how a lot of the jobs are listed these days.
Yeah, and you never know, the demand could be so high, there might not be applications from people who meet those requirements, and then they're looking at the next best. Other things you can do, you can go online and find additional like programming workshops and things to add certifications and show that you're still learning, even if you don't have on the job experience. That can help you stand out too.
I think it's pretty common though, like you said, you start at one job, kind of get your feet on the ground and stuff, and then move into maybe a job that's more where you want to be.
Yeah.
There, I think next week we're talking to Matt. I think he did kind of the same thing. He started at a basic job and it moved on to a different kind of job after, whatever before, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Other things that I was going to talk about on this slide is just that it's an ever-going process. In college, you're thinking about, all right, what path do I want to take? What can I do with my degree? Your options are probably pretty broad. I found that internal conversation with myself never really ended. I'm always thinking about, all right, am I still enjoying what I'm doing? Do I want more development? Do I want less development? Or like working with my management to see about like a management career path. They've been really supportive about that. Can't encourage that enough. Make sure you're getting good management support to help you direct your career the way you want it to go.
Now, where are you physically based?
I'm based out of the Bloomington office, so in the Twin Cities.
Okay, so yes, and how do you have to go up to Thief River Falls that often? Or?
Only maybe once, twice a year most. The Agile Expo, I went up there to talk about what our team does to the other folks who maybe aren't familiar, which is a pretty common challenge for my team. We're named Mosaic, which doesn't really scream China sales, so that was a good experience to go up there. But
Oh, yeah, so you're in the Twin Cities and your partners, because that's one thing I find sometimes with these career paths is when you have a partner, this balance of, you know, where you can work, where your partner can work, and that's.
Were you talking about a partner here?
Oh, aren't you married?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see
your
what you
wife.
yeah,
You
okay,
have a wife?
yeah, partner,
Excuse me.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I ended up in the cities was
Right.
that she didn't have opportunities here, so then I started looking elsewhere and
Right.
and that's how DigiKey came.
Yes, right, so you know, that's always interesting.
Good question.
Do you ever have to travel to another country like India or China, in order to like
I
do any part of your work?
Personally, I haven't yet. I have a team member who has. We've talked about that I might be going to China. You know, it for developers is maybe less common when you go up into management, more likely, but this opportunity is still there. So
How about languages, do you know, is English, been enough for you, do you know?
for the requirements for our team, just English is fine. We actually require most of the China-based and India-based people all speak English. But I just took it upon myself to start learning Chinese because I'm on the site so much, and that's helped a lot.
Yeah.
Still a work in progress.
So
but-
is the site in Mandarin, or what's the written language?
Yeah, so it is referred to as simplified Chinese.
Yeah.
And there's also the traditional Chinese used in Taiwan and in Hong Kong.
Uh-huh.
But we support the Dacian, so China, so that's always in simplified Chinese.
What is the hiring process for like software engineering in China? And how is that different from other internships?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you quite. Could you- Could you state the question again? I couldn't hear.
How is like the interview process for like software engineering? And how is that different from other internships, given that software engineering requires very technical skills?
Yeah, did you have a technical interview, did you have
Yeah.
coding during your interview?
It was a pretty rushed process for me, but I think it's pretty typical that you'll have um technical interviews where you might have some coding problems or things. We do that for our internship hiring process. We'll present an idea and we'll do pseudo coding, so you don't have to know all the syntax off the top of your head, but we're just looking for that you can think through the problem. We're looking for that thought process. But yeah, there's going to be layers of the personal side usually comes up front and then dive into the technical skills in maybe a second round. I did have that process for my employment at Minnesota Power.
Do they do the same for like the scientists role?
I don't know as much about the data scientists. I wasn't part of any of those interviews. I don't know if they have like specific technical questions tailored there.
I wanted to ask about job security because of AI and like just layoffs in the, especially like recently we have had a lot about layoffs in the tech industry. So just wanted to ask about job security specifically at DGQ.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a hot topic, AI and code that writes itself. DigiKey in particular is their statement from who knows how long, like I'd say their whole company history has been, the people are the most important. So even if code can be written by technology, somebody has to run that technology that writes the code automatically, and who's going to do that? So I think the job need will always be there. Maybe the demand is so high that the industry is finding ways to fill in that need in other ways. We're writing applications to do the things that we can't find people to do. But I do think that this is personal. We're still going to see developers aren't needed. It would be a long ways before, you know, code is just writing itself everywhere.
So I've gotta ask you, because I'm wearing one of the DigiKey shirts from the computer contest, and I don't think we've announced it, but we have all the information about the coding competition.
All right.
All right. The coding competition will be up at the River Falls coming up, and has Rick sent that email out yet? seen it, but I don't think you've seen it. So did you ever do the coding contest, the programming contest?
Yeah, I did. I did it my junior and senior year, did the programming competition. That's how I got my foot in the door at DigiKey. Just kind of personally knowing what the company was, what they're about. So when I was thinking about software engineering opportunities, I knew to go and look for DigiKey. But no, that's a great experience, and they give you a tour of the facility and they treat you real nice. So I haven't been there since starting at DigiKey, but yeah, I'd love to go. I'm not based in that area. So
Right, yeah, but you recommend programming?
I would, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Get as many Scholastica teams up there as we can.
Yes. So, yeah, that's what we're trying to push it, because usually we've only had one team.
Yeah, and the first year I did it, I didn't really know what I was doing. So even if you score poorly, just go do the experience. You'll learn from, the mistakes and just being there. Maybe go back again next year and
Who's done the DigiKey? Who did it last year? Anyone? I think it may have been Zach and Reese and mine. Okay, so, but yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about MongoDB, because we don't really use MongoDB.
yes,
So, tell us what's that
The-
like and
it's
stuff like that.
it's a real up and comer.
Yeah.
It is fast. It uses JSON objects to represent the data inside of it. So instead of querying and getting back a table, you query and get back a list of JSON objects. Yeah, it's fast. I can't say that enough, because there are downsides for, I don't find it very readable. But it is flexible. You can change the model pretty well. I am just starting the crash course on using it, so I'd be able to tell more after I've done that. But
And it's a non-SQL database, so you're not,
Yes,
you're not
exactly.
writing SQL, you're not
Exactly.
joining tables or whatever,
Yep.
everything's in JSON.
Exactly.
And then you, maybe you don't know this, but I assume you're taking these JSON objects and you've got some sort of object to database, JSON to a C# object kind of
yes,
conversion or automated, I think that's, I know, yeah, I never remember on library, I haven't used MongoDB, and I'm just, because we'll talk about ORB, object relational, thing where we will convert from like a C# object into an SQL
Mhm.
table and back and forth. But the same thing we can do
Yeah.
with JSON too, right?
yeah, we do a lot of what we call serializing and deserializing,
Yes.
converting things to and from C# models and JSON representation.
So when I tell you how to do serializing, remember.
I do that countless times every day. I always have a JSON editor tab open in my browser.
So how
Question.
many like programs do you find yourself writing during like a week or something like that?
Sure, it comes in cycles. We'll hit the ground running on developing a new project, and then it kind of eases up as it goes into a QA break fix. Then the development I do is the fixes. At the peak, I can be writing 6 hours a day pending meetings, which can be a lot of meetings, but yeah, then I'll try to catch up on documentation and writing unit tests and kind of more code maintenance things as I'm waiting for QA to complete. So
Can we talk a little bit about then what your environment is? So are you in Visual Studio and you in VS Code? How? Well, maybe it's back to the talk about this Scrum and Agile stuff. So you've got, you're doing sprints, you're doing Scrum, you have a board, you're doing 2-week sprints. What does that look like?
sure, yeah, we do 2-week sprints. We have our regular ceremonies, so we do sprint planning to start it out for an hour and a half. We talk about what we're going to do for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll meet daily every morning for half hour to talk about what we've done, what we plan to do.
So you do kind of have that stand up.
Yep.
You
Yeah, we have
know,
our
sort of
stand-up
a
meeting.
daily stand, now how does that work with a distributed group?
So our China team isn't a part of those.
Okay.
There's no overlap, so it is just our India and US based teams get together to talk about yeah, what's being worked on essentially. And then we have backlog grooming meetings where we go over the work that is coming up and decide what we're going to work on next and priorities and things like that.
And how do, so you've got, so at the beginning you decide what tasks or what stories, or when you, what are these
Yeah.
objects you're working on?
Yeah.
And where are they tracked? Are they tracked in
Yeah.
DevOps or?
Yeah,
what?
it's tracked in DevOps. We have what we call a backlog with epics, features and stories is the hierarchy. So we'll sort it into, okay, this is for the China website, this is backend support, and that's kind of the epic level, or maybe we have projects as well. And then we'll have features broken down more. And then the actual unit of work is a user story or a PBI product backlog item. And those are the things that we commit to. Each PBI should be completable within a 2-week sprint.
And do you measure them? Like our book talks about like story points, you know, how do you do anything like that to say how big these stories are gonna be? Or
Yeah.
and who assigns, how do you decide who gets each story?
So our team, well, yeah, we use story points, and it varies team to team what that actually means. For some teams, 5 means 5 hours. For some, 5 means 5 days. You have to ask who wrote it, what it means. But as we're planning, like in those backlog grooming meetings, the person who's expected to do it usually pitches a number. This is the way our team does it. There's a lot more refined ways to do it with like bidding on story points and things, but typically the person doing it says a number. If anybody disagrees, they'll say, no, I think it's more or less. And then you pick the next number higher or lower. So that's kind of how we estimate. It's pretty, it gets the job done. It's pretty quick.
And are you tied in with source control with this too, and what are you doing?
We're still working on that. Our source control and our stories are still separate entities. There's a lot of features that will let us connect those, that when you deploy the code, you click that production button, it automatically closes your PBI. Super cool. We haven't done that yet, even though it's available. Yeah. And see, I talk about deployment. Yeah, we use Kubernetes, which will track changes through our service now, and then say, okay, Kubernetes is going to be deployed with this code base, and you can refer to your code bases, and your versions are created automatically, and it automatically creates your containers. So a lot of that is managed by our platform tooling team, which is really nice. Everything is in DevOps to have a user interface with buttons to create your releases, to bundle your changes together and merge into master. Master being, have you talked about like master branches?
We haven't talked too much, and so we're gonna do a sample sprint with GitHub pulling and stuff next week. I think it's on the schedule, so
Okay.
that they've done, some of them done some of that, but so again, so you start with a like the main branch code, and at the beginning of the sprint, are you pulling a branch? Each developer's kind of pulling a branch, a copy of the code, and
Yeah.
modifying it, and then at the end, or at some point when that, you're merging that back in, right?
Yeah, so sometimes it's by feature, sometimes it's by backlog item. You'll create a branch, and maybe continue that branch through multiple sprints, but we use Visual Studio, and that has tools for pulling the code and then creating branches, make your change and then push them up to the cloud repository. And then, yeah, you can share those branches, merge them together based on the needs, and merge them into the master branch, which is our rule is always only the master branch gets deployed to production, so that you kind of have that tree structure of your code.
Other questions? I'm just you know, there's lots of we're gonna cover in this class that I'm just trying to pull in now, and that's why I'm asking why. So when I get there and I go, remember, Steve told you, you should listen to this.
You know the answers.
Right. Can we talk a little bit about testing, because you said you did too much unit testing, it sounded like before, and then it sort of horrible.
Right.
You were working more with, you know, customizing off the shelf systems, right?
Yeah, we didn't have a big enough IT team to employ strictly QA testers. We usually had our, I would call them power users, the people who really knew how to use the software. I would write test plans for them, and then they would go through and do the testing. But we didn't have any branching, we didn't have deployments with different versions and things like that. So we had to find creative ways to send them a code change without actually deploying it to production.
So about DigiKey, tell us about how QA works. So, you know, when you're working on Sprint, what do you do unit testing, and then you hand it off, you do like an integration test, or you know, do you have a QA people, or how does that work?
Yeah, some teams do integration testing. Our environment is limited because needs for an additional license for the China-based ERP, enterprise resource planning software. So we just have like our local environment, you can test things, and then DevOps has integration test and production deployment pattern where we can deploy to an integration environment to try and confirm that those connections between databases and other APIs are working just from the developer's perspective. And then the QA team will manage the test environment and decide, okay, well, I want to test this thing next. I'm going to deploy that branch. That was the branch the developers told me to deploy. And so you have kind of the QA and dev team have their own environments to manage on their own and to do their work independently. So as the QA team is testing one feature, I can be working on the unit tests for that same feature or for another feature. So there's
So you develop your own and run your own unit tests, right?
Yeah, the developers do the unit
Right.
testing.
Now, do you don't do test-driven design where you write the unit tests before you do the development? Some places don't do that.
No, we don't do that. I
Right.
know of it, but no.
Right, yeah, so you create the code and you write the unit tests on that code. And then I assume you have unit tests that regression kind of unit tests that you can run on
Yeah.
that code, or?
We're still building our suite of automated tests that the idea is that they'll run on a schedule, maybe daily, and they'll send back errors like, hey, we couldn't create an order, what happened? And to supplement the work that the QA team is doing.
In this class, we'll create unit tests, you know, we'll be in Visual Studio, we'll use Visual Studio, you know, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So then once you're done with the unit testing, then it's shift to integration, you know, the next level. Because I assume, so, because in my mind, you're just doing the China website.
Mhm.
And I assume then that has to tie in with the whole DigiKey inventories, you know, I don't know what those systems are, but I assume there's a whole system that your software has to tie into to get stuff in, so, right?
Yeah, so the unit tests are always independent. They're not going to integrate with anything. You
Right,
mock
yeah.
things and you just say, let's theoretically say, if this system gave me back a success response,
Right.
does the code do what it's
Right, so
supposed
you
to?
have these mocks or these
Yes.
stuff,
So-
you know, for that, but now, then you turn it over to the QA
Yep.
team. And they have a
Yeah.
whole environment, a whole.
Yeah, so the QA team is navigating the website and clicking the buttons and checking to make sure that there's no error pages popping up. And the automated testing will be sending requests to these APIs deployed to integration where those connections are actually being made versus the unit test is just mocking those responses.
Okay. So again, we'll see some of that stuff in here, but we'll be more on the unit testing stuff. We don't do much.
There's probably less to integrate in a classroom.
Right, yeah, because we don't have a whole inventory backend or, you know, all this other stuff. Okay, last questions?
What language do you use for programming, and is there flexibility to use a different language for developers?
We use C#. It's kind of, we're establish ourselves as a C# shop, so it's what we use. There are a couple of older projects. I was just working on a Java project recently, but the idea is that we want to get rid of that. So yeah, C#.
All right, so we wandered down, what time, what's our? Starting at 45, is that when we're doing our? Say, what's the little? Say, right,
It says
what's the little
11:45.
poster saying, when are we doing this?
It's 10:45 for one.
Okay. 45. Oh, no, that's the interview, what's the one above that? What do you think?
Yeah, 11:45.
11:45. Yeah, information says 11:45. So we should wander down that, probably what they were. So if you're gonna, if you want, we're gonna wander down the writing center, have some food. Here. And more maybe tea. Stuff. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Probably have to like shut up.
Yeah, I have to do some stuff here, so.
Give you back.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
I got, it seems like, with VS Code, I got everything working.
Okay.
So if you need some help.
Yeah.
Let me know,
Okay.
because I was able to run the code that we